Hello, good evening. My name is Chani Sims, and I'm the founder of CISO. We um, we are running International Women's Day podcast this month to highlight the brilliant females in the industry. So I got Sarah Armstrong today. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Shani. Nice to see you.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Thanks for coming on. I know it's the dinner time and your TV time. It's so nice to have you and finally, have you talk at CISO platform. So we are really
Thank you.
excited, and I'm looking forward to hearing your talk. I think it's very relevant to the days we are in now with crisis management. um, just a little bit about myself and the CISO platform. So I've been in the industry for about 17 years, starting as a infrastructure engineer, and then now I'm more into virtual CISO, cybersecurity, and also I'm managing the Meta Defense Labs business in here and in Sri Lanka, and also volunteering for the CISO platform. So at the moment, the Meta Defense Labs is sponsoring to host these events at CISO. So CISO is an open give back platform to create a talent pool of emotionally intelligent cybersecurity leaders. What we're trying to achieve is to bridge the gaps in cybersecurity, diversity, and leadership. A lot of the problems happen because we don't have the right skills, right kind of teams, diverse teams, and also the leadership skills within the cybersecurity professionals. So we are trying to create what we call emotionally intelligent cybersecurity leaders. We have emphasis on emotional intelligence. I think we believe that it's a very important soft skill to have. And this platform is open and it's created for community to give back, uh, for people like yourself to share your knowledge. I think knowledge sharing is one of the best things you can do as a human being.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so it's to support the community, train the community, and also help and find jobs for the community. So that's what we are trying to create. So the CISOs will have the right talent pool to touch into from CISO. And pretty much, yeah, that's what we're trying to do. And we have a structure of 5-day boot camp, quarterly meetups, and monthly mentoring course addition to these sessions. I'm planning to run a boot camp this year. We were going to have it in our office level 39 premises this July, but with this coronavirus going on, I don't think we can have a classroom based yet. So what we plan to do is have online boot camp, which is a really good thing, so that we might be able to access a bigger audience to give scholarships. So the first boot camp, we gave up to 100% scholarships to people to come into the boot camp and learn about cybersecurity leadership, personal development, emotional intelligence, all these subjects. And that was a huge success. So we are trying to do the same thing, but maybe online this time. So hoping that we could reach out to a bigger audience so everyone can join and enjoy. But it would more be as same as the classroom one, but at least we have to adapt to the the environments now. So that's what we are planning to do. And yeah, so just tell me about yourself, Sarah, and how you got to where you are and what you're doing now.
Hi, thank you. So, yeah, hi everybody. My name's Sarah Armstrong-Smith. So my career probably goes back over 20 years. I actually started my career from business continuity perspective. So I was actually involved in the year 2000 program, Millennium Bug. Back in 1999, I was working for a water utility company. My job at the time was very much focused around what testing of the IT systems needed to happen on a stroke of midnight. But it got me thinking about, well, how do we keep the call centres operational? How do we get people to work? And all of what happens if the IT systems go down? How do we know where the vulnerable people are? Those type of things. And at the time, I didn't realise that what I was working on was actually business continuity. It just felt like common sense. It was something that I really enjoyed doing, and I decided that that was going to be my career. So on the stroke of midnight, year 2000, nothing happened. So it was going, well, is that good planning or waste of money? And so the decision was made actually that it was good planning. So I was seconded to head office, and I put business continuity plans in place for the engineering division and laboratories. But I really liked working in IT, in the technology side of things. So in 2001, I actually joined AXA. So AXA had gone through a series of mergers and acquisitions, and they'd been left with lots of different IT departments. And they wanted to bring all of those together, go through server consolidation, digital transformation programs, and I was working in disaster recovery. So I had two roles, one of which was to provide all the disaster recovery testing for the data centres, but also to test all of the operating companies' business continuity plans. So within a few months of me joining, 9/11 happened. And that really gave the company a wake-up call, because historically a lot of the backups were all done with tapes. So they started moving towards data replication, really accelerated the transformation programs. And then from there, I actually joined Ernst & Young. In 2005, I worked there for 2 years, a mix of assurance and advisory services. My first day on the job was actually July the 7th, 2005, which was actually
wow.
London bombings.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, that was a a lot of the companies were really waking up to terrorism and are hitting home. And again, sort of transforming a lot of the way that they worked and operated. I got involved doing a lot of audits and advising. It's my first role of really being a consultant. And then in 2007, I joined Fujitsu, and I was working in their cybersecurity practice. So I actually worked for Fujitsu for 12 years.
Oh, wow.
I had a mix of roles. So I created a Centre of Excellence, business continuity, disaster recovery, crisis management, cybersecurity. And when I was there, I was also the professional services lead for GDPR. So doing a lot of work in data protection and privacy. And what I always describe about my role is that I work on the business side of cyber. And what I mean by that is really trying to understand what's critical and why. And almost, if you like, try and provide the business case for what cybersecurity services, tooling, infrastructure is needed to support the business. But more importantly, if you have a cyber attack, a data breach, what's the business doing? So, a lot of companies will just look at the cyber response, but the cyber response doesn't work without that wider crisis management wrapper that goes around it. And then last year, I worked for the London Stock Exchange for 6 months. So I was the group head of business continuity and crisis management. And that was very, again, to kind of look at the just how do you break down all these silos of business continuity, disaster recovery, the cyber security, the physical security, and bringing all of those together. So there's a big push from UK regulators, particularly FCA, Bank of England, to look at this operational resilience. And what they really say is, we don't really care what type of incident you've had. We need you to keep your services operational. And that's kind of where I come from, really, is that looking at that big picture, that holistic impact, and how all of that. And I kind of bring me right up to date. Currently, I'm a non-exec director for a cybersecurity startup. Very exciting, very exhilarating. So we're due to launch in May. And obviously with the coronavirus, and many companies are in the same boat, things are starting to slow down. and just kind of rethinking our processes and practices, really.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's such a part that you've been involved in a lot of crisis management. You've got a lot of experience in that area.
Yeah, lots of different types of incidents. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
brilliant. So I know who to pick. When to pick your brains when I need help.
I'm hoping crises don't just follow me around, but
Yeah.
it's I have been in a fortunate position, whichever way you want to look at it.
Hmm.
But I have been involved with lots of incidents. Most of them are IT related,
Yeah.
as you probably would expect. But I've also been involved with floods, fires, frauds, all sorts of different things. And actually, I was actually involved in the H1N1 pandemic as well when I
Yeah.
was at Fujitsu. So that was going back 2009. And I was working for one of Fujitsu's global customers. That was, again, very much thinking on your feet all the
Mhm.
time. As we are now, it's a very changing dynamic. I think almost things are changing daily. So you're having to rethink your plans and re-strategize, and really, I mean, it's a bit of a cliche, but think outside the box, really, in a lot of these things.
Yeah. I mean, the technology is advancing so fast,
Yeah, exactly.
and it's just like you plan something, by the time you execute it, something's changed again. That's the challenge, isn't it?
That's it, exactly that. And I think it's the pace of change is something like we've never seen before. We
Yeah.
talked about digital transformation. Obviously a lot of more companies now are sort of moving to the cloud, these sort of hybrid models. But on top of that, we've then got all of this sort of artificial intelligence and robotics, and we talk about the fourth industrial revolution, and
Mm.
it's really exciting. But obviously, a lot of that comes with risk as well. So
Yeah.
just about how you manage something.
And the other thing is we are we can't move as fast as the technology moves. So that's the challenge. So how do we get skilled up? How do we prepare?
Yeah,
Um, and getting the human side of things, ready is I think probably is the biggest challenge nowadays.
exactly. And I think, and this is the thing, one of the things I talk about, is the technology itself isn't the problem, although it's
Mm.
moving at such a rapid pace. We're the ones who have to put the brakes on. We're the ones who have to then instill those proper controls and
Yeah.
processes that have that wrapper around it. Because it's, as the minute you put out products which have got gaps in, vulnerabilities in, they all get exploited. And
Yeah,
even the exploitations is even happening
that's
just.
the thing. And this digital transformation, everyone likes to talk about these big buzzwords,
Yeah,
but when it comes to doing it, are they doing it right is the big question. Because in the past, if you look at the people, you had at least a couple of years to get skilled up, get trained, and now you don't have that. It's just like instant. You have to get yourself skilled up for new technology and adapt to it. Um, so when you're doing these kind of things, so you're going into finding these new tech gadgets and technology, but you don't have the right skill set or the experience to test if these been done properly, and are they secure, there's a lot of breaches happen probably because of that.
so, and I think we're in a world of agile as well. So it's fail fast, fail often. It's
Mm.
almost like we've accepted the fact that to get products out there quickly,
Mm.
go to the market quickly, we're going to introduce products with vulnerabilities in it.
Yeah.
And it's very easy for us to turn around and say, we'll release updates, we'll release patches, but we know some companies just can't act quickly enough to get those patches and updates tested and deployed.
Yeah.
And that assumes that you can get out to every single device and endpoint simultaneously, which we know can't happen.
Mm.
So we're kind of, I think we're making a rod for our own back in some ways, because as I sort of say, we've created the problem. So we're always playing catch up to fix the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, true. Do you want to get started with
Yeah,
your
yeah, sure, sure.
presentation? Thanks.
Okay,
I'll,
thank you.
I'll shut up and I'll go on mute.
Okay, right, okay, thanks. So what I'm going to be talking about today is brand protection. Some of the things that we've already talked about is actually going to be coming up in the presentation, I think. So as I've probably noticed, that I've been involved in lots of different types of incidents across my career. Being on the front line of many a crisis, and what I've kind of learned from all of those things actually is the incident itself is not as important as the way it's handled, particularly when we're talking from a brand perspective. So your brand takes up years to build and could be shattered in minutes if you don't actually act properly and in the right way. And really what I want to talk about is the do's and don'ts of good crisis management and really how to protect your brand. So I want to talk about some brand impacting incidents. So I think, when we talk about the coronavirus, for example, if we talk about natural disasters, if we talk about things which are potentially outside of your control, your customers and your employees typically tend to give you a little bit of leeway. They're a little bit more sympathetic to the cause. If, however, this is what I would call a man-made incident, something that you have created yourself, or something that you should have known that was coming and should have protected against, your consumers are not as forgiving. So I'll give you some examples. So we've seen, industrial size accidents. We've seen fraud, so this can be external fraud, but also insider fraud as well from your own employees. Obviously, we've talked about the risk of cyber attacks and data breaches. Dependent on what type of business you are, you're going to have intellectual property rights. And the theft of that, or the exposure of that, can lead to massive impact to your brand. And if we think about some brands as well, if we think about some of the retailers, so let's look at Gucci, Louis Vuitton, those type of companies, they have a massive problem of counterfeits. And the mass market of those in some countries, obviously having all of those counterfeit products out there is really damaging. But equally, if you have products which have got defects within them, and those defects are known and you don't do anything about it, or similarly, if you have the need to do a product recall and that recall is potentially damaging or harmful to the consumer, and you don't act quickly enough, then all of these things can really damage your brand. But I think as well, there are examples where the company themselves, through their CEOs, leaders, that kind of thing, they can damage the brand just by saying the wrong thing. And I want to give you some examples of these. Some of it you might find quite shocking, but not hard to believe for some of them. So the first one, I'll try not to swear as I read them out. Customers who ask for a refund should F off. So that actually came from the CEO of Ryanair. The next one below, I'd like my life back. To about 10 years ago, Deepwater Horizon, a major incident. And this was the CEO actually saying that he wanted his life back. The next one we're all very familiar with is the Trump. Anything he doesn't like, he basically calls fake news. And the other one, the next one below, is really interesting. So this is where you actually have to be careful about who your brand ambassadors are and your influencers. Because sometimes if they're not trained to say the right thing, they can really harm the brand. So the next one down is actually from Helen Mirren, who was the brand ambassador for L'Oreal. And she said some of the L'Oreal products that she was advertising probably do F all. And I think the next one down, one that's happened quite recently, obviously Elon Musk, when we had the Thailand cave rescue, and he accused one of the rescuers and called him a pedo guy. So that incident alone, I think, dropped 4 to 5% of Tesla's share price in one go. And I think probably the most famous of all is the last one, which says it's total crap. So this was actually from Gerald Ratner. Going back to the early 90s, he owned a chain of low-end jewellery stores. He was asked to present at the Institute of Directors, and he was actually told that make it a little bit funny. So he said this word. So he basically turned around and said he couldn't believe people were buying his products because it was total crap. So the next day, that was actually published out of context into, I think it was the Financial Times. Within days, they'd lost over 500 million of their share price. I think in today's money, that's probably about 1.3, 1.4 billion. I think by the end of the following year, Ratner's didn't exist anymore. So it's kind of a joke, which think about what you say and how you're going to say it. And I think what the people now call it is don't do a Ratner. So really what I want to talk about is some of the don'ts, the do's and don'ts. And I'll start with the don'ts of what to do when you have a crisis. And the first thing is don't deny you have a problem. We have a little thing called social media. So it doesn't matter how you try and deny a problem, it will get out there. So we've talked about some of these industrial accidents or major incidents. Typically what happens is there's a post-incident review or some kind of maybe assessment from regulators, that kind of thing. So all these things come out in the wash. It's really important as well not to deflect. So this is the favourite of a politician. So when they're put on the spot, having to answer some very difficult questions, they will probably answer a question with another question, or look to blame someone else for the issue. I think as we're seeing right now, even with like coronavirus, we have to be really careful that we don't downplay incidents. So I think, we see a lot of press coverage that says, for the vast majority of people, they will suffer very mild symptoms, they will fully recover. But we also need to appreciate that we have got fatalities. And for those families who are affected by that, this is a major incident for them. This is very, very traumatic. So however much we think about the incident, we have to make sure that we don't downplay it to those individuals. And we have to be careful not to disrespect. So it's very easy for us to turn around and look for someone to blame when there's a major incident, particularly when you can sit there and you try and blame your employees. If someone did something they weren't supposed to do, you blame the third parties. You can blame a myriad of different things, but ultimately, the whole point of this is not to disrespect your employees or any of your stakeholders. So I think really what I want to do now is just talk about what you should be doing, and I've got the A, B's and C's. So I'll start with the first one, which is really to acknowledge that you have a problem, and the quicker you can acknowledge and get in front of it, the better. And also it's about having the right level of accountability. So then, as I sort of said, it's about, whatever is going on, even if third parties are to blame, even if there's been a fraudulent incident, even if somebody has downloaded information they're not supposed to have and walked out the door with it, ultimately you as the company are accountable for absolutely everything that happens in that company. And then the next point really is the action. So you have to do what you say you're going to do and follow through on it. Now, I think I see a lot of companies who have these kind of empty promises, but no, they'll say, "Oh, we'll take your security really seriously." But actually, you have to take action and repeated action. and that has to be sustainable across the whole incident. And so the B's, for what you say has to be believable and also has to be factual. So it's very easy when you don't have all of the facts in front of you to speculate. But that speculation can actually come back to bite you at a later date. I think one of the good examples I can probably point to, I don't like using it necessarily, is TalkTalk incident, cyber attack, which is, I think it was 2005. But the issue with, they kept changing their mind in terms of the impact, the number of customers that were affected, because they didn't have all the facts available. And the press really picked up on this and really just kept going at them. So actually, you know, the TalkTalk incident itself wasn't actually that bad in a big scheme of things in terms of the impact. What really harmed their brand was the way they handled it and the way they mishandled it, because of what they were trying to put out were facts which were untruthful facts. And I've talked about this whole point about being blameless. You know, it's, as I say, it's very easy to point fingers, but that's not the objective of the game. So really what we're trying to do is, you know, even if we looked at, well, you know, let's say from a phishing perspective, somebody pressed the link, you know, somebody used the same password for every single site, someone was able to do a mass dump or download of information. Actually, what we should be looking at is, how does that happen? What can we do to actually improve the process? So rather than thinking about who's to blame, again, it's about us having that accountability to say, what do we need to do to improve the process? And the final point is the brand, and I keep coming back to this through the process, is think about the perception of your brand, and how is this perceived from different viewpoints. So any information that you put out there, as I sort of said, you know, you have to be careful about how that is how it could be misconstrued or misheard by different stakeholders. And as we've seen, the press have a tendency sometimes to take certain bits of what out of context and spin it. So it's really important that, you know, you're watching what's going on all the time. So is to be able to monitor social media and what's going on, and anything which is coming out which is untrue, that you have to be on that straight away to answer to that. So one of the worst things you can do, and I think people sit on the fence with this about responding to some of these statements, and I think it's really important actually that if statements are going out there which are false or untrue, or out of context, that they are corrected as soon as possible. So the C's, can't kind of reinforce this point enough, is communicate. And this is communicate to all of your stakeholders and consider the messages for each one. And this is about, as well, is it's very easy. Sometimes companies just have a one-size-fits-all message, but actually different stakeholders need to hear different things. And what I've seen quite a lot sometimes is actually we're very quick at getting the external messages out. So we'll give a statement to the press, we'll give a statement to customers, but actually we forget about our employees. And these are on the front line. So these actually should be the people we're communicating to, is really often, very quickly, what's going on, what are we doing about it? And actually, you know, if we do that right, our employees can actually be our strongest link, because they feel very informed, they feel like they're actually part of the solution. And the second point is about collaboration. I'm a massive fan of sharing and collaboration. So when you're in the midst of a major incident, sometimes you can feel everyone's on top of you and you can't see the wood for the trees. But actually, there's so much help available out there. And this is where you really need to lean on your suppliers, you know, lean on your customers and ask for help. Don't be ashamed to ask for help, because it's not a sign of weakness. I think it's a sign of doing the right thing. And this third point really about compassion and empathy, and real empathy. So as I sort of said before, it's very easy to write, bog standard marketing text that goes out, as I said, to someone says, "We take your security really seriously," but do you mean it? Do you really? Because it can sound as very contrived and empty words. So actually, I think, and we were sort of talking before the call about, one of the upsides, of the situation that we're in with coronavirus at the moment is this compassion that's coming through for people, and how people come first all the time. And that's another point I'm going to kind of repeat myself on. But it's just really important that, at the end of the day, whatever we do is we've got to do it right and do it for the people, and make sure that we keep people as happy and informed as well as we can. So this next point I want to talk about is about establishing cadence in a crisis, and we talk about this sort of people, process, and technology, and how all of these things need to link together. But as I sort of say, the people element has to be at the top of all of that. But the people can't work without the right processes, technology, and support. And actually, all of these things have to be together. And what I mean by the cadence really is actually is that synchronization. So if we think about that central point, so all of these things have to come together simultaneously, and work in unison. And that's what I mean by that cadence. So you can't have one without the other. And actually, one of the things that we can be doing in advance of a crisis is preparing ourselves. So when we have a major incident, it's not about just doing it on the fly. It's not just winging it and hoping for the best. Actually, we have to have people who are trained. We have to have people who have had awareness. And we have to make sure that whatever the crisis is, those people are being looked after. Because again, we think about the situation that we've got now. It's very easy for some companies to just turn around and say, go and work from home. We know there's a lot of industries that can't happen. They cannot work from home because they just don't have the ability to do that. But also there's a lot of frontline services. So we're seeing our hospitals, medical professionals, supermarkets, emergency services who have to be available. So, so we've got to think about, how do we support them? Now, how do we make sure that they're still able to operate and do all the things that they need to do? And the other thing that we talked about really was about this technology. So like it or not, technology is embedded in everything that we do. And again, we're seeing that again right now, with this amount of remote working that's happening. And that's only able to do that because we've got so much remote infrastructure capability. We've got a lot of services that have moved to the cloud. We've got people working on laptops. We've got mobile phones, we're boosting the signals and all of these type of things. So we need the technology to be there to operate as the best that we can. So again, we need to have confidence in that technology. So and one of the things that we also spoke about as well was about, unfortunately, during these type of situations, that technology is at massive risk. So it's a massive risk from failure, it's a massive risk from cyber attack and breaches. So we have to be on top of that. And that's where that process wrap comes in. So this is about having the right controls in place, about having those processes and plans, and everything operating together. And should the worst happen, we've got all of those processes and procedures lined up, and everybody is confident, or as much as they can be, of what to do and how to do it. But even in this sort of, as we're finding right now, things are happening at such a rapid pace, that it's a situation where we have to keep evolving, having to keep thinking on our feet. And this is where the beauty, I suppose, of crisis management really comes into play, because you need all of those parts interweaving together and working in unison. So, with all of these things, why protect the brand? What we're doing it for? And hopefully, the whole point of this, your brand is so important to your company and to the future of the company. And we talk about brand equity, but that's about how valuable your brand is. And it can take years to build. It can take minutes to shatter. If you don't look after it. And this brand is all about, that customer experience, building the loyalty, because no matter how bad it goes, you need your customers to keep coming back. You need your customers to understand the situation that you're in, and to help you and to guide you through it. And we've, the other thing we spoke about is the people element, but the employee well-being, satisfaction, happy employees make happy customers, as we know. And all of this combined is really about having trust and transparency, and having it so you're believing of what you hear is the truth. And I'm going to believe no matter what you do, what you say, you're going to mean what you do. And ultimately, all of these things is all about growing that brand. So I just want to sort of finish really. This is about putting that brand back together, and I'm going to use the Blues Brothers for this. So in summary, I really want you to just kind of think about the A, B's and C's. All the good things you should be doing, but having a plan. But it's very easy to kind of say, oh, I have a plan. I wrote it 5 years ago. I had a consultant in. It's on the shelf. I'm gonna get it down as and when. That's not the way it works. This should be a living, breathing process. So even when you don't have a crisis, you should be preempting a crisis. So you have to keep practicing, you have to keep repeating, you have to keep training, giving awareness, making sure that it's an iterative process. And the more you keep doing this, the more natural it's going to become for people to be, when they're in this situation, that they just know what to do and how to do it. And the third point really is about controlling the narrative. And this is about, communicate, and you don't communicate often enough. The press are going to make things up. and this is really about, I don't mean to be disparaging to the media, because actually the media can be your friend. But you have to keep feeding them with information. And I think, as you sort of see the situation that we're in with the coronavirus, that regular repeat of information, having the people who've got authoritative people who are communicating that. So we've got chief scientists, we've got the Prime Minister, we've got special aides. So all of these people make you feel like this incident is in control, even if it is actually out of control, if that makes sense. And really the fourth point is doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. We shouldn't have to be telling companies right now to pay your staff. Your employees are the most important part of your brand. If you don't have your people, if you don't have the people who are supporting you, you don't have a brand. This is the end of your company. So I can't really sort of labour that point enough, really. And ultimately, as I sort of said, is when all of these, you've had a major incident and you have that post-incident review, sometimes there'll be inquiries. These are the type of things that come out. These are the type of things which people are interested in. Is, did you heed the warnings? Did you do the right thing? Did you look after the people? And all of these things combined is, as I say, it's all about protecting the brand. So, any questions?
Thank you, Sarah. That was really good. Yes, I do have a question. How often should companies, now I know certain companies have different business continuity plans, crisis management plan. What is the structure that you should typically have for a medium-sized company, if you're a medium or small-sized company?
Well, I normally sort of say is your business continuity plan should be aiming to deal with the impact of an incident rather than the cause. So you can think about all of these different scenarios, but whatever happens isn't going to be the scenario that you plan for. So every single incident is different, although they might look similar. So what I would normally say is there's 4 scenarios. So one of them is your loss of building or facilities. So if you may have a denial of access to your building. The second one is loss or failure of a key IT system. The third one is loss or failure of a supplier. And the fourth one is loss or failure of your people. Now, what I normally say is it doesn't matter how big or small your company is. Actually, if you break it down to its lowest denominator, every company is basically the same. Okay, the only thing that sets us apart is what we sell, what our products and services are. But we've all got people, we've all got IT systems, we've all got buildings, and we've all got suppliers. So actually, if we can kind of say it doesn't matter what caused any of those things to fail, what we then have to deal with, assuming one of those things, 4 things, have failed, what we're going to do about it. And it could be actually that one causes a ripple effect into the other ones. Which is kind of what we're seeing right now. So actually, if you looked at it at face value with the coronavirus and how many cases there's been is quite small compared to the size of the population. But because of the secondary impact of that, which is then trying to do the social distancing and isolation, it starts having a knock-on effect onto your supply chains, your people not being available either through the fact that they're having to work remotely or they've got caring needs, schools closing down, those type of things. And what we're seeing right now is because of the amount of people who are working remotely, it's put a massive strain on networks, cloud infrastructure, telecoms, that kind of thing. So actually, one incident can cause one or all 4 of those scenarios. And then it's about prioritizing all of those things and prioritizing all the resources so that we can get the right people to the right areas and utilizing the right services in the right way.
Thanks. Why I asked particularly SMB market is that some people have this mindset where they think that because the company is small, they don't need business continuity plan. But I think quite the opposite. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But on top of that, I think this is where I think a lot of the larger companies have a duty of care to support the smaller suppliers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what's quite refreshing at the moment is 2 things. So one is a lot of the larger companies have now turned around and said for the SME suppliers, they are going to pay them immediately rather than waiting for their 30, 60-day payment terms. But also, I think it's really nice, the community spirit. So we're seeing a lot of push about please support your local suppliers.
Mm.
And I think even if you think back a few months ago, we would talk about digital transformation and things like that. It was almost death of the high street because so much services were moving online. And some of the small SMEs couldn't operate anymore because they just couldn't operate in that environment. And actually, what we might see is a reverse. At the back of this incident, actually, it's a reverse because actually what we need to have are these tight-knit communities to make sure that we are supporting each other. And actually, we do have those local supply chains as much as we have the bigger supply chains as well.
Mm-hmm. And thanks for that. So how often should people test their BCP plans?
Well, people used to say once a year.
Yeah.
I think the problem is we're in a period of massive change. And even if you look at the pace of change in technology, the pace of change just in sort of the different types of incidents that we're seeing and those type of things, I think waiting a year, too much has happened in that time. So, and this is what I was sort of saying is, it has to be an ongoing iterative process. So the more that we can embed a lot of these things into the everyday working, the better. So I think gone are the days, I would say, of where we might have said, here's 30 minutes of e-learning once a year, have a little bit of security training, a little bit of business continuity. People don't really pay attention to it. And as soon as they've done their e-learning, they're gone to the next thing. So actually, I think when I go back to that kind of 3-circle thing and the process, it's our job to try and actually make this process as embedded and as normalized as possible. And I think we can do a lot of that through, automation and things like that. And actually just thinking about how can we improve our processes. So, I always like to think about, how bad the incident is, what's the opportunity, what is going to, when all said and done and we come out the other end, there is lots of opportunity for change here. I think that's one of the great things that's come of this. I mean, we talk about flexible working, and this is flexible work. This is kind of like, it's kind of proven it itself, hasn't it, to a certain extent.
And I think
even those companies who might be a little bit sat on the fence about the adoption of digital transformation and cloud and what have you, I think they're in that kind of, there's an opportunity there to help them to get on board with some of these things. But also being mindful of the fact that we're so critically dependent on the availability of our healthcare services, critical national infrastructure, and how much we need to be able to work together and to collaborate with each other to keep all of those services up as best we can.
Yeah, I think sometimes I tell a lot of the companies, always link your change management into your business continuity, because every major change, they should be testing your business continuity plans as well, right?
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to IT systems, I think DR side of things, that's where a
Yeah.
lot of things can go wrong. I've had so many incidents in the past where
what we're seeing is, from some of the regulators. So if we look at the in the UK, the FCA and Bank of England, there's a big push on operational resilience. So they're almost kind of getting to the point where I don't really care what type of incident you've had. You need you to keep those services operational. And actually what they're saying is, you need to think about what your worst possible case scenario is and test it, and almost kind of go way beyond, stress test, what's the worst possible thing that could happen, and go beyond it.
yeah.
I think historically a lot of companies have kind of gone not to that. They'll go to, oh, well, no, we'll go here because that going there is too scary. But actually, I think, we've got to get to that point where however bad and scary it is, we're going to have to test it. We're going to have to go there.
Yeah.
And just kind of like, how do all of these interweaving parts come together when it really hits the fan?
Yeah. Prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
Exactly that. Yeah.
That's great. Is there any other questions from the audience? You guys are mute, by the way, if you're talking. Another thing I always try to convince customers is to run a lot of crisis management or tabletop exercises. What would be kind of the best scenarios that you could provide in terms of if you are to run a, let's say, if they don't have the budgets and if they want to at least run one crisis management tabletop exercise or simulation, what kind of events would you recommend?
Probably the type of events that are going to happen most regularly are IT events. So you start with the things which are most probable, which are going to have the highest impact, and start there. So it's about building your confidence up. Start small. So it might be that your first test is just a run through of your plan, to make sure that any assumptions stand up. So it's very easy to turn around in your plan that kind of assume that if your IT fails, IT is going to fix it. You know, if I can't get access to my building, property will magically find me another building. But what I sort of say is, if you've not actually verified any of those assumptions, they're risk. Actually, you know, so anything that you're assuming in your plan is going to happen, you actually have to verify that that is actually going to happen.
Yeah.
And actually, what transpires is this is where you get all the gaps. This is where you find out you don't have the SLAs, you don't have the capability. You know, as you're sort of talking about disaster recovery, you know, you haven't done a DR test for 3 years. You don't have the right levels of security controls, you know. So actually, the operational side of the business has to be able to interact with the leadership team, and those two have to work in unison. So sometimes you have companies that will test one and not the other. But actually, as you start maturing your process and your testing, you have to be able to put them interlay them together. And it's making sure that the people, technology, and the process can all kind of combine together when they need to. So unless you're testing all three of those, you're probably going to find massive gaps in one or more of those areas.
Cool. Thanks. And the other thing is, when it comes to DR testing, it's always, you know, not having the resources, not having the time, not having the money.
Yeah.
When the thing happens, it's going to cost you more and more, more than what you'd have spent on testing.
Yeah, the impact of not doing it is actually higher than doing it, I think.
Yeah.
And you know, I think we are. I'm hopeful, and I again with my opportunistic and look on the bright side persona. I think we are in a, you know, hopefully we're getting into an era. We're just having that, you know, we call it, you know, security by design, resilience by design, and privacy by design are just embedded. It shouldn't be something that you have to go and ask the board for. It should be a given that if we're going to do the right thing and you know, prove that we're doing the right thing to our stakeholders, no matter who those stakeholders are, that we have all of these things embedded, we've tested them all, we're confident in them all, and should something happen, we can react and communicate as quickly as possible. Now, we're never going to stop things happening 100%, and we know that. You know, for all the will in the world, you know, we always talk about, you know, we're always playing catch up on the technology and these different processes, and you know, things like the coronavirus that we're in now, this can spiral, you know, potential. But all of these things combined together, as I was saying, is the more that we can embed a lot of these things in, the more we practice it, the more that you know, the processes are there behind us to support us, and we're actually collaborating with our stakeholders as far out as we can. And then when we have an incident of this magnitude, the impact reduces, you know, quite a lot, because we've already kind of got a lot of these things in place to mitigate it.
Yeah, I mean, you were spot on with the secure by design, privacy by design. I mean, that's something that we always go on about as well. You know, if companies are still thinking, okay, we need to reach this certification, that certification, compliance to this regulation, you are actually not there. You know, you should be by default
Yeah.
compliant with these regulations and requirements. And that's kind of how you then improve your posture, right? So building cyber resilience and business continuity strength.
I think one of the things I talk about as well, you know, from a brand protection, crisis management perspective, you know, with this, we're in this kind of race to get our products out really quickly because we're in a really competitive environment. So if we knowingly put products out there which have got defects in, gaps in, hasn't been tested properly, you know, various different things, and we kind of commit to ourselves internally that we're going to release this product out, we have to then deal with the consequences. And this is where I sort of talk about the accountability. So, you know, for all the goodwill in the world for us to say we're going to patch, we're going to update, we're going to do all these releases, we're going to do all these things. If anything goes wrong, bring the product back, we'll exchange it. whatever the case may be, that impact could be really severe, dependent on how that product is being utilized. So if we have a mobile phone that, combusts in someone's pocket, then that's a pretty big impact, and if we're causing those things to happen to our customers, because we have allowed that to happen. So actually, this is what I'm talking about. So your brand and how you manage your brand and how you manage this kind of whole process, you have to be then accountable for whatever happens next.
Yes, and you are so right. It's just sometimes they think security or business continuity. I call cyber resilience the business continuity as well. If you don't have that, and if people look at it as a cost, extra cost, but it's actually how much are you willing to sacrifice your brand reputation, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So if your product's not, if your product is out with faults in it, and then you haven't really tested it properly.
It's an intangible cost, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
How do you put a cost on your reputation?
Yeah,
How do you put a cost on your branding? So actually, if we look at, even some of the companies that have had major cyber attacks, let's look at Experian, for example. The amount of money it's cost them, I think, was it what, 400 million, I think, just to fix the security, let alone, probably compensation claims and potential for identity theft, all of these things combined. Actually, if they've taken a lot of the steps to begin with, that would have been a fraction of the cost. And sometimes it's hard to actually put that into perspective. But this is what I'm sort of saying about, it's about properly understanding your risk, being able to effectively articulate the so what, the impact if it all goes wrong. And that's where we need that, what's your worst case scenario, and test go right to that edge. And actually, if you can understand all of that, then it almost kind of comes a no-brainer. And we're not we've got to be mindful of the fact that companies don't have massive, endless pots of money. So it's our job to try and work out where the priorities are. What's going to have the most impact? What's going to actually give us the most value if something goes wrong? Because everything we're talking about is all there to protect the brand, ultimately, from failure.
That's true. We've got another minute if anybody wants to ask a question.
Hi, Sarah. I got a question. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, thanks.
Ah, cool. So it's important to practice your business continuity plans and maybe do like war games and things like that. So I'm guessing there's going to be a lot of war games based around the current COVID-19 thing we're going through now. But of course, there's going to be a lot of people that have lost loved ones during this. So I guess we have to be sensitive to that when we run these war games in the future. You got any advice around that?
Yeah, it's kind of come back to the point I was talking about, compassion and empathy. I think it's really easy for us to just talk about numbers. So we can talk about numbers of people who have been affected by, the coronavirus, number of people whose records have been impacted by a cyber attack or what have you. But actually, we have to look at it from the people's perspective and make sure that we are understanding that these are real people who have been impacted by these type of events. So you're quite right. We have to be very mindful that this is quite a raw subject, and we have to be very sensitive to some of the planning and scenarios and things that we're doing. And I think, trying to do something right now, it potentially gets a bit too emotive. I mean, people still need to be able to do their planning and what have you, but I think ultimately through all of this, and this is why I keep sort of reiterating, is people must come first always. So even if companies are thinking about, what's the financial impact to my business, actually your business does not operate without the people. So I think everything, I sort of look at every crisis management scenario, every business continuity plan, every incident should always have people impact that comes up first, and no matter what the incident is.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. I think we've come up to the hour now, so
okay,
really good and informative. So I just wanted to say thank you, and thanks, Clive, for the question.
you're welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, yeah, I had the mic out there. But it's really great to have you, and we're going to be continuing with this podcast for the whole month with lots of people. So feel free to join us, and also if you want to in future want to participate in one of the boot camps to give back or help us, let us know.
Yeah.
And we are running also the monthly mentoring calls every third Tuesday of the month. So we have leaders coming and joining up and talking about these topics. So it'd be good to have you one day as well.
Okay.
And if someone wants to contact you, what's the best way to get to you? LinkedIn or?
LinkedIn or Twitter. Yeah, either of those.
Right. Okay. Any last messages to the community?
Could I say good luck?
Thank you. Yeah.
I just know, in all seriousness, I just wanted to sort of say, I think we have a really brilliant community, very supportive of each other. And I think actually, don't be afraid to ask for help. We're all here to help, no matter how big or small it is. So I think that's where I'd leave it, really, is, whatever you need, just ask.
Yeah, exactly. And if you don't ask, we would never know. So that's the thing. So you had to always ask if someone can't help you, and then I'm sure there's someone who will find the right person to help you as well. That's why I always tell the community. And yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Have a good day, and stay safe, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.